Hi, I'm Frederik from Skyscrapers, and welcome to this last edition of 3 Short Tech Talks. Just to recap the background again, this year with Cirrus we surveyed SaaS companies about their DevOps and cloud native practices. If you're a CTO, I really think you should check it out. So I've made the link available. Your challenge, if you choose to accept it, is to find that link. This is the last talk, and the last veteran we'll talk to is Erwin Gernaert. He's the co-founder and chief hacking officer at Shift Left Security. In my opinion, he's really one of the real good security experts in Belgium. And in his job, he helps digital companies with security. I also agree with his thinking that you should think about security before it becomes a problem. So, we'll go into security strategies for CTOs, about developers' responsibilities. He has a really nice quote on that, and the risks of the hidden complexities of the cloud. This is also the final talk, but still a great listen. So, enjoy. All right. You good to go, Erwin? I'll kick things off. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the third and last in a series of 3 tech chats that we were having with 3 software as a service veterans. Before we dive in, let's do some housekeeping first and some general information. So this is a tech chat based on the 2021 survey that Skyscrapers did together with Cirrus, where we surveyed a bunch of software as a service companies in Belgium about various perspectives or challenges that they have, like cloud, DevOps, CI/CD, security, and things like that. And in the 3 tech talks we had, we actually discussed these results with 3 experts, which with each their own unique view on things. It's maybe interesting to know we'll be sending out the recording and the survey later on after after a couple of days. So if you want to rewatch this talk or the other 2 talks, you'll be able to do so. Before we dive in, the talk shouldn't take more than 30 to 40 minutes. And if you have questions, we actually welcome them. If you look carefully in the Zoom window, there is a Q&A function. I think it's at the bottom. If you ask a question there, we'll try and we'll do our best to integrate that question into our conversation. So don't hold back, ask your questions. We'll try to cover every question in some way. All right. So we've had a talk on Tuesday with Tom Klaassen, who was mostly focused on the more personal challenges and team challenges of CTOs and software as a service companies. Yesterday we had Nick Boekhart, who is actually was focusing more on technology choices and containers and serverless and platforms as a service and things like that. And today, we have Erwin Gernaert from Shift Left Security. So your title on LinkedIn is co-founder and chief hacking officer at Shift Left Security. We've known each other for quite a while. We go back quite a while, and yeah, you're one of the people I always look up to and respect in the area of security, which, in my opinion, a lot of people have a lot of things to say about, but only a few really know what they're talking about, and I consider you one of those. I like a lot your pragmatic approach to things. You're quite no bullshit in that things, which I think is an essential aspect of doing security. So, hi, and maybe this is a good chance for you to just shortly or briefly say, what do you do in your daily work life? What kind of customers do you work for, so that the people listening in can kind of relate and know why you're here today.
Okay, thank you, Frederik, for having me, and let's get started. So I'm Erwin Gernaert. I'm already more than 20 years active in IT security. In those days, I started to work for one of the first web agencies in Belgium, The Reference. They still exist, and they're still one of our customers, so which is cool. And that's how I got rolled into anything that's related to application security. And that time, building a website and then being attacked and hacked, and it was really scary at that time. And after 20 years, you would think, well, that problem is solved, but instead of getting better, it's getting worse. And now with the move to the cloud, It's important to think about security, and that's why we called our new company Shift Left Security. It means you have to shift security left and start thinking about security before building stuff or uh, having something in production. And so Shift Left Security officially launched 2 days before the lockdown.
Nice.
That was rather really exciting because we were hoping to get some traction there, but then we were stuck at home, which made rethink and reinvent our business plan. So, and what happens is you look at your existing customer base, and these are all startups and scale-ups in Belgium, relying on
Okay.
cloud, either in fintech or medtech or software as a service or whatever you have, where we help them with tools and continuous monitoring and continuous scanning and also some advice on protecting their cloud platform, but also their internal security. And so we have now about 20 customers where we do a lot of things, but we don't do anything operational. We give
Okay.
advice and we give them tooling and help them to increase the
Okay.
security, maturity, and of course the visibility in what's happening in their environment.
Okay, cool. It's funny to hear that Corona made you rethink your business plan. I think you were not the only person who got into that
Yeah.
situation, so it's interesting to hear. Just before we go into the content itself, can you just say, okay, what are the people you talk to most? Are they like CTOs, developers, CEOs, CIOs? What are we talking about
Um,
here? Mostly
well,
these startups and scale-ups, I guess.
yeah, so we have one scale of more than 100 people. So there I'm in contact with the COO. He asked me to clean up the mess. So after 2 years, we have cleaned up the mess. So we're now trying to keep it stable. Then I have like the startup with 3 people where I talk with the technical guy and the co-founder or the CEO. Some other startups, it's the founders. So it all depends on where they are in their life cycle and growth process. So I have customers that have funding. I have customers that are growing organically. So I have one that when we started, they were with 8, now they're with 22. So that's a total different way of
Okay.
working. And you also have to help them with their growth because the more people you have, the more security risks you introduce.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. And I think the profile that you just mentioned and all the different profiles is a perfect fit for the people that are listening in and that we surveyed as well. The survey was also on companies between anywhere from a couple of developers all the way up to I think 40, if I'm not mistaken. I wrote it down somewhere. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We had some outliers with 100, 200 people, but so I think your practical expertise will definitely be
Mhm.
interesting. So I suggest we just dive into the content. So as I've said in the other tech talks as well, we did the survey beginning of this year, where we touched on the 6 areas that we find interesting, at least from our perspective, as skyscrapers being. So that's team, cloud technology, delivery, CI/CD stuff like that, architecture, operations, and of course, last but not least, security. So I think, or I propose at least for this conversation to just start with the easiest, most applicable section in the whole survey for you, which is the section of security, and we'll just figure our way out through this conversation. So if you just look, yeah, what is your main observation when you look at the security questions? What was the first thing that really caught your eye?
Well, first of all, I think it's like 60% is already using a web application firewall. It was like, whoa, finally we are there. That everybody knows that they need to have like this additional layer in place to protect the web application or the API against these attacks that are now automated bots scraping. I think that's very good, and I think that a lot of the reason why has to do with the cloud provider, that they have just the possibility to enable that functionality out of the box. So instead of that you need to install something, or also I think the cloud variants like Cloudflare or whatever you have, they are very straightforward and easy to use. So
So
That
it's almost like a kind of a no-brainer these days compared
yeah,
to some years
yeah,
ago.
yeah, absolutely. And so that was a really interesting result of the survey. And the other one that was a bit conflicting for me was like, okay, we rely on our developers like 30%,
Yeah, I
but
think the question just for the listeners. So there was a question. Let me just see. Are you actively using industry standards when it comes to cybersecurity? That's the question I think you're talking about. And
yeah,
so you're saying, yeah, 30% says, we just rely on our developers.
yeah. And then the other answer is that, and we will invest in training. So it for me, that's a contradiction, and because if you rely on your developers and you're going to invest in training, why, in what kind of training are you going to invest? So is it for the security training, or is it for having your developers have more engineering skills to be able to use the cloud provider and all that? So that was a bit
Mm,
a
yeah.
strange observation from my side.
And can you just go a bit deeper? I understand better. So yes. So let's say, well, we just rely on our developers, but at the same time, yeah, one of the investments we're going to do is more training. So yeah, where is the contradiction then exactly?
Yeah, so if you rely on your security of your stack, that it's already implemented correctly by your developers, then you assume that they already have the skill set to do that properly. But then on the other side, well, you say, well, we have to invest in training. And because that question is part of the security chapter, then I think, okay, um, what do they need to know more or know better if they already do the security part of your environment? So
Yeah,
either
yeah, yeah.
there's a
Okay.
skills gap or an expertise gap, but how are you sure that what you have running is still secure or not? So that's important. And then linked to that, and then we are more than 50% says, well, and then we are going to introduce DevSecOps.
Yeah, yeah. DevSecOps. Yeah, nice
Yeah.
term.
And then it's already another conflict because you rely on your developers for the security part, but you say we need additional training and we are going to do DevSecOps. We give the developers even more power to do everything.
Yeah. Okay. Can you just for the listeners briefly explain what DevSecOps means? Because I don't think everybody's familiar with the term. Most people these days know DevOps, which we kind of, for example, sell as a service, but DevSecOps, what is that?
Yeah, so it's that you include security in the automated building and deployment and to keep it running from a development perspective. For example, let's say that you build code and then you have automated checks and tools in place that do a code analysis or do like an automated scan or deploy it in a test and launch some tool. And when there's something not okay, you will stop the deployment there. It's like this gate, security gate, which is fully
Okay.
automated. But of course, what is really, I have talked with a lot of developers and they cannot estimate the impact of a specific vulnerability. So when you have a lot of tools that give you a lot of false positives and noise, who will make the decision of overruling that or making
Yeah.
changes when you have to go to production and when you have a strict deadline of going live?
Yeah. And actually, just coming back to the developers, does then that is that the training they should get as developers? Because you mentioned, okay, so there's developers, they rely on developers for security, but then they also say the CTOs, oh, but we need more training. So is that then the kind of training they need to be able to understand that? Or is it really more training about consciousness? I don't know. What is your view?
Well, because the developers hold the keys to everything, and because they have access to the production environment, they
Mm-hmm.
have access to the database with GDPR data or with source code. It's really important that, first of all, developers have a better understanding of security awareness. Why
Mm-hmm.
do we need to secure access to source code? How do we implement authentication? When we use React, for example, how do we know what the security features are that we need to enable? When we are on Amazon, do we need to enable LDO security tools that are a part of the Amazon suite? And all these answers are yes. But what we have seen in the last years that developers are not security specialists. They're good at
Yeah,
writing
exactly.
code, and they
And
want to
delivering
write
business
code.
value and yeah.
Yeah, and then of course you can say, but now you have access to production. We will take away that access because from ISO or from compliance, it's not allowed to have that in place. And then you see those developers struggling with getting their code deployed. And last month I did a security assessment, and then you know that the developers have access to the production environment from their own laptop using SSH with a private key from anywhere in the world. I'm like, oh, that's a big no to do that. And these developers think, but what's the problem? So the training is really to convince them that you need to have security in all places. And it's not relying on, we are running on Amazon Web Services and they have the ISO certification. We're cool. There's no problem.
Right. So yeah, it's not about becoming an expert. It's more about being aware of the whys and maybe also understanding what are the solutions that we can use to still, as a developer, develop frictionless, which is important for a software as a service, because they have to develop as quickly as possible and deliver value. But at the same time, at least do it in a way that's secure and aware, and that they don't use SSH from all over the world, or even worse, FTP, if that even still exists. I hope not. Because it's actually interesting, because we had a talk on with both Nick and Tom. We touched also the aspect of the full stack developer, and we were actually going a bit deeper. Sometimes full stack developers, especially a year ago, 2 years ago, people were also expecting them to build the platform, for example, which is kind of our space, for example, at Skyscraper, that they would also be like specialists in Amazon services and networking and containerization and container platforms, which of course is also impossible. You cannot be like an expert in all these layers. It's more about, and Tom said, it's more about developers needing to be more of a T-shaped profile these days. So a good developer probably needs to know very well, how do I add value? How do I create code that, is functional and does something for our customers and in the domain that we need to. But they need to be aware these days also of, okay, well, Amazon, what does it offer? What are the layers? Containerization, what does that work? CI/CD, how does that work? And why is it important to me? Security, why is it important to me? How do I work in secure ways? So without really being experts. And that's kind of where we landed with in the conversation with Tom.
Yeah, and he is right, because everything is becoming so complex that the higher the complexity of something, the harder it is to get security right, because you have to think about every layer that you need to enable security, or when there is something that cannot be protected from outside the box, that you need to add additional code or build your own security framework, or enable the web application firewall, get an audit logging, create dashboards on that's not that straightforward. When you are just graduated from a university and you start your first job, and everybody's looking at you, okay, but you're the developer, you make sure that everything stays secure. I mean, it takes a lot of time to really understand how to secure these environments. And every time that you think, okay, now we have the situation under control, something change. You migrate to another cloud platform, or you start with a hybrid, or you go to a new security framework or a development framework because it's hot. And we always have to keep on following the new stuff. We start with virtualization, we go to cloud, then we add Docker, then we add Kubernetes, then we add this and that. And people need to be really specialists
at every layer.
In every layer,
yeah. It's interesting that you said there is more complexity. Whilst I think if I compare to the old days when I was still developing some code and stuff a long time ago, I find it's much easier these days. You can just grab some APIs from some platform as a services. You can spin up a Kubernetes in a couple of minutes, or a Fargate or a Heroku. It doesn't really matter. And actually, I think for a developer, there's less complexity. So you're saying there's more complexity. So where are we seeing things differently then?
Yeah, because, let's say, you start up Kubernetes. How do you do it? Well, you see some tutorial on the internet. You follow the tutorial. You copy paste some instructions that you run on the container, and your application is up and running.
And it's super easy because I can just deploy containers and my application will
Yeah.
run and scale and everything.
And the day after that, somebody found out that your Kubernetes API is on the internet with the default credentials, and they deploy a crypto miner, and you start paying for their Bitcoins. And then at the end of the month, you get this invoice from Amazon, a few $1,000s, and like, what's happened?
Yeah,
Because most hacks are discovered like that. Something strange happens, and you see that. And then the developer will say, but I didn't know that there was this hidden API that can be used for administrating stuff is on the internet.
So it's more about, okay, there is more simplicity and velocity in using all these services, but it's a lot of the complexity is maybe more hidden away, and not everybody's just aware of this complexity and the impact of this complexity, the security impact.
So we have some customers, and they're all running now on Microsoft 365. They pay a lot of money to have the most expensive license for each user to be able to have all the security features, but they don't know that they need to log in and enable all those security features. And then you can say, well, you pay for it, but you don't have it activated, so it's no use. And then they have a breach because somebody used the same password for his Facebook, for his Microsoft environment, and then they get in and they steal all the data.
Okay, now you're making me scared, but okay, I guess that's part of the job of a security expert. Okay, it's actually quite interesting. So you have the knowledge thing. You have all the cloud services and APIs and frameworks and things you can just click together, and then you can in a very short time create nice business value and nice startups and companies. But you introduce a lot of hidden complexity with a lot of security risk in a very short time. I have a feeling the whole time since we've been talking, there's like a gap, and you already touched it with DevSecOps. So let's go into that. So you're talking, okay, so you have skills, developers need to be aware at least of what is going on, not experts, but be aware. So what are the missing links, or what do you think is needed to have as a SaaS, to have a healthy, pragmatic, scalable security practice? Like, what are the top 3-4 things you really need, do you think?
Well, I see a very good evolution in the security tools that are out there to really help developers to know. So, okay, somebody made a misconfiguration. At the moment that happens, you want to be aware of that so you can fix it. And so we need to have more visibility in everything that we have running. So if you look at Gartner, they always have those new hypers like cloud security posture management, CSPM.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's
expensive word.
Yeah, so we work with a startup in Tel Aviv, Orca Security, and what these guys do, they hook into the API of Amazon, of Azure, of Google Cloud, and doing that, they have a full visibility of your entire cloud estate. So they can, for example, say, hey, you have a machine which is connected to internet and it's being attacked, and you have SSH running and it's not patched. And that's something that you want to know, and you can integrate it the DevSecOps way with your Jira or your Slack, that every day, okay, we have like the security baseline, and when something changes, it can have an impact on security, but then the Orca will see it and notify me.
Yeah, so automated visibility and transparency, and there's tooling and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then the technology is there, but of course you need to integrate that with your DevOps. For example, a typical question I ask the startups: okay, how many attacks have you got today? And they're like, we don't know. Well, but that's something you want to know. Typically, what we see when we have a new customer and they sign up for our continuous scanning. So we do like this full-time scanning on websites and IP addresses. And typically when they know that we are starting to do that, they are looking at their logs. And they're like, hey, did you already start with the testing? Because we see this request from Chicago. And they were like, yes, we started with testing, but we are not coming from Chicago, right? And then show me the logs. And then they send a screenshot of the logs. And then the client IP address is 0.0.0.0. And I was like, okay, why then don't you have the full log? Because how can we know what's happening? It seems that in Azure, there is a feature for GDPR that Microsoft will hide the client IP address.
Handy.
Yeah, so now they need to configure it to keep it, or either you have to build it yourself. So it's always, when you start digging into getting the visibility, that you will find issues.
Okay, and also, and this allows you then to, think about these issues and kind of assess what is the risk. Is it a technical risk? Is it an organizational risk? And then probably you can go from there.
Yeah, and we need to be proactive. Don't wait until there's an incident that we have to look into. Okay, we have this hack. What happened? Because then it's too late. You will not have the logs. So and that's a very good difference now in the security community. But of course, security, it's like a different world. And you have the dev world and you have the security world, and they don't really communicate. But in the security world, there is a lot of openness nowadays. Okay, this kind of attack we have seen. What are the techniques, the procedures, the tools used? And in the States, they have a website. They publish all that information, also with indicators of compromise. And what is very interesting for every company, that you just start thinking, okay, what if we were attacked in this way? How could we see if we were impacted, yes or no?
Kind of a risk assessment, which is actually in all security frameworks like ISO 27001. It's one of the steps you have to go through. You have to kind of assess, okay, what are the risks we can think of, and how, what is the chance we will have it, and what could be the impact. That's kind of what you're saying as well.
Yeah, but on a
technical level. Yeah.
Show me the evidence that IP address that is known as a bad attacker, that we don't see it in our logs, that nobody really tried to do this kind of exploit against our Kubernetes or whatever you have.
No, but what I understand, but again, you're kind of coming back to the essence. So yes, you can have security awareness, you can train on that, but the key is still automation and tooling. That kind of is, which is much easier these days than it was maybe 10 years ago. 5 years ago. Even.
Like you say, it's very easy to build something, to automate something. So what the developer can do, think about what they use use case stories to implement functionality, but they should also think about abuse cases.
So use cases and abuse cases. Okay.
And
nice.
What I don't want to happen in my application, and can we script automation to test for that? For example, if I'm logged in as Erwin, can I see Frederik, his account? That's just 2-3 API calls. But if I get the data back, you have like this gate that says, stop, somebody disabled the authorization check in API.
Okay, clear.
That's something you want to know before it's in production.
That's actually a really good idea. Okay, nice. I'm just mindful of the time as well a little bit, and actually a really nice takeaway. Use cases is one thing to think about, but abuse cases, think about that as well.
Use cases.
Yeah, definitely. So we already touched a little bit. I think Kubernetes, and well, as you know, we are very active around Kubernetes. But what is your feeling about like containers, and how does that relate to security?
Well,
or how does it help security or risk security? I don't know. It's an open question. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Maybe also serverless. So it's a bit of a broader question.
Okay, let's start about containers. I think from the deployment point of view, having like Terraform or other, again, automation, it helps you to automate deployments, and it helps you to have like this secure script that you have in place that will set up a new container with all the latest updates and then deploy the code. And instead, during my 3-week sabbatical, I've read a lot on immutable production. That we have people that say, we don't patch production, we rebuild production.
Yeah, that's what we do, by the way. We don't rebuild, we just always throw away a cluster and build it again. So
that's exactly the beauty of doing the container stuff, because in the old days, we have to reinstall a Windows machine well, it will take you a lot of time pushing the next button to have this Windows and then start removing stuff or disabling stuff. So with containers, and then it's really important that you look at how do you use the containers and what is your stack. Yeah, because I know of hosting companies that have like these their own built container stuff, and they don't do anything security around it, and they push containers everywhere in a data center that is cheap. Well, I don't call that really doing something in cloud, but you can really have a good setup in Kubernetes with secure containers on that, with everything configured in a secure way. That's much better than have a developer starting from scratch and doing it all by himself in a manual way. Because when
Yeah.
you do something manual, we all know developers are not good at writing documentation. So if you ask, how did you set it up? Okay, we don't know. And did you change the secret key to sign your GWT tokens? Ah, no, it's the default one. Then it's game over, because nowadays you see a lot of bug reports that a lot of those security researchers just abuse default setups.
Yeah, exactly. What we used to call in the old days copy paste sysadmin work, which is fine to start, but then you forget about 80% of the work that actually has to be done. So you touched something interesting, actually. I'd like to go into that. You said like there's some hosting providers, let's not call names, or container platforms that just, put containers in cheap or some data centers without really knowing where. I'm not sure how many people or SaaS companies use these, but what we see, well, we're biased, of course, but all of our customers are on Amazon Web Services or Azure or Google. But lately, we've been feeling some pushback from customers of our customers, where they say, Amazon, it's a US company, it's a cloud provider. There was also this ruling last year, the Schrems 2 ruling. So I know we're going a bit more into a legal area now, but I think you have some things to say on that as well. What is your opinion on like, there's GDPR saying, we have the data subjects, we should be careful with data. You have to really think about your sub-processors, and, it's a US company, there's a legal risk. So it's not a good, Amazon or Google or Azure are not valid options. While, to be honest, in my opinion, there is no real alternatives that are not American or Chinese for that matter. So what is your opinion on this whole GDPR versus big cloud providers and things?
Well, I'm not a real fan of GDPR because it's more
That's a weird thing to say as a security person, but okay.
No, because there's too much focus on the legal aspect. And you sign a contract that you will respect the data privacy of customers, of your customers. Okay, fine. But in reality, nothing changed. The people are looking, okay, where's my data located? Well, if you have all these APIs communicating with each other and you use everything like in a SaaS way, you don't know where your data will end up. You will not have like this, how you say it, full coverage of everything in that loop.
Yeah.
Because when you buy a service with a credit card, there is no DPI that you will sign with that.
Well, technically you should, but
yeah,
anyway.
you should, but you don't know what provider are they using.
Yeah.
So well, first of all, who do you trust? I think if you cannot trust Google or Microsoft or Amazon, then you have big problems. And what are you scared of? If they want to hack you, they will hack you.
When you say they will hack you, who are you talking about?
Well, the Chinese, the Russians, the Koreans,
the Americans, the English.
Americans. But yeah, so you really need to think about what is my. First of all, look at the legislation. You need to act as the good house husband, father. So if you do everything you can in your power and of course in your budget to secure that data, if somebody hacks into Amazon and steals all the customer data, you cannot be the blame of selecting Amazon. In the old days, when an IT manager bought IBM software, you will not ever get fired of buying Blue. That was like
if you do it well, of course.
Yeah. So but of course you need to be it's not because you decide to go with Amazon that you need to put everything in the States. And you need to respect the boundaries. If you are really thinking about GDPR, then you can do it like in Microsoft Germany, which they have introduced the concept of separation of duties. So Microsoft doesn't have access to
Okay,
the
interesting.
data center because they have outsourced it to T-Mobile.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is like this separation of duties. So, but of course, if you see now yesterday in the States, they seized some .com domains of Iranian news agencies because they have access to ICANN.
Yeah, to the .com registry and
yeah. So that can be a
so
problem.
my takeaway is okay. There is the legal foundation for GDPR between US and Europe for Amazon because of the Schrems 2 kind of it fell away, but it's just a legal framework. If they really want to, they can still hack you, and if they, I mean, so it's kind of a if you think about it pragmatically, it's kind of a non-discussion in a way. Almost.
Yep.
Just do your best and be conscious of it, I guess.
I can understand that especially if you talk with banks, you have to have a data center in Belgium, and we want to see the lights blinking of the server with our data on it. Okay, you can do that, but it will cost you so much money.
And slow you down so much in terms of innovation. So
yeah, and then you have like this, and also from a security point of view, but the more isolated environments you have, the more complexity you will have. How will you update one data center automated? Because if you don't have Kubernetes, but you're still running a vanilla PHP there, because you have to do it on that stack of that provider that is located in Belgium, and you don't have the flexibility to do Terraform, for example. So it's
kind of risk versus compliance and speed of innovation. It's always a balance you have to strike. So super interesting. We're going towards the end, so I actually had a couple of questions more, but let's say there's also some questions from people. But let's first ask this. Well, let's first do Mark's question. It's a very detailed question. I don't know if you can see it.
It's a very good question.
Answer very briefly, because I'm also mindful of time. I don't know if the people can see the question, but I'll just read it out for everybody. So Mark asks, so I understand the least privileged approach, but when you say a big no-no for connecting with SSH with only a private key, what do you advise as additional security? Since the only additional security that Mark is aware of, like IP filtering, is less and less usable since having a fixed IP is more and more of a problem. Especially in these times of remote working. So what is your initial response? And maybe if Mark wants to go deeper, he can contact you later, but just give a short answer.
So this is about endpoint security. How do you make sure that you have full control of the endpoint and that it's secure to be able to connect? So it depends on your cloud platform, but you can have like this VPN solutions nowadays that always give you the same IP address, and you can use IP filtering on that IP address. We work, for example, with a startup in the States. It's called ToDeal, and they have like this secure cloud environment, and every endpoint has this agent, and every time you want to connect to your Amazon or Azure, whatever, you will always have the same IP address coming from that cloud, independent of your own location. And then you can have like these additional policies that only allow access when you're connected in a secure way to that secure global network, they call it the SGN. And then you have policies that you can configure. So for example, now, if I'm logged in on a laptop with the agent, but I'm not logged in on my Azure tenant with multi-factor authentication, I will not be able to access the Azure portal because it's identity location driven.
So again, there's advanced tools available these days that kind of fix this problem in this cloud native world. That's basically the essence.
I used to work for big banks and large enterprises, and then you look at the typical enterprise solutions that are very, very expensive. But because of the technical evolution, you can have security in place that's not too expensive for a startup. And build by demand and have a lot of features and functionality for not that much money. and that's
Yeah.
really important. But a lot of people don't
kind of
know
the cloud way of thinking, basically.
Yeah,
It's
of
an
course.
operational expense that grows along with whatever you need. And okay,
Yeah.
so I would also like to add to Mark's question. First question to ask maybe is, why does somebody have access? Need access? Is there no other way to do what you want to do, like through automation or whatever? And only think of those cases where, does the developer really need access to a production system? If it's to deploy a workload, I don't think that is needed. If it's about troubleshooting and stuff like that, I think you could get quite far with instrumentation. So I really think that's also a part of the element. Anyway, unfortunately, we're short on time, and we'd like to respect everybody's time, and that's what we promised in our announcements. I think it is super important. Maybe just one more challenging question in one sentence. How do you sell security to your board? I'm asking this because actually in the other talks we had, it was like, yeah, everybody knows security is important, but for some reason it's difficult for a CTO. Usually CTOs understand why it's important, but it's difficult to sell to the board who is very focused on getting more customers, and security is experienced as friction. So in one sentence, how can you sell security to your board as a CTO?
Okay. In a
Think it through.
startup scale-up scenario, you always want to have either more funding or better acquisition or integration with a larger entity for your solution. Due diligence will focus more and more on security aspects. So if you don't have the security in place, you will have all the responsibilities and the warranties on paper in a contract. And when you have been breached before the acquisition, it will backfire in your face. That's where we go. When there will be
a very good reason.
Yeah, and contracts that say, okay, we take a stake, but if, for example, tomorrow there is a leak of data, you stay responsible for that breach.
Yeah.
And deals will be stopped of that.
And you've seen this?
Yeah. But I think a few years ago there was this big Belgian security company, Vasco Data Security, the guys of the banking card authentication.
The
they
tokens.
acquired a company in the Netherlands, the DigiNotar, but they were hacked, and they had SSL certificates being abused in Iran to read Gmail, and they have to get the company bankrupt. So it was like they paid for it, and then they had to let it go.
Yeah, that's a painful story.
Yeah, and I see. So a lot of VCs are looking at security audits and pen testing and also risk assessments when they want to do the investment initially. So you can say your board, if you want to get money, spend money.
Yeah, and it's probably also something about somebody says on the Q&A, I think it's Tim, I'm not sure, or Tom, that's probably Tom. It's also about risk management for the board, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now we are in a situation, every day you open the newspapers, they hack the biggest names, ransomware attacks, blackmailing, and it will not get better because there is a full economy running on all those gains of money. So we're talking about billions. So that will not stop. It will only get
good incentives.
worse. And there's now a study that victims of ransomware that paid once, like $500,000, $1 million, they're being attacked again because they already paid.
Yeah. So there's money.
So now you see that the insurance companies are going to refuse to pay for that.
Ransoms. Yeah. Okay, I think you've given a couple of very good reasons to go to your board and say, okay, this is why you should probably think about security a bit stronger. Okay, first of all, thank you, Edwin, for your time and super interesting insights. I have a feeling we could have talked for another hour. Maybe that's an idea for a follow-up talk in the near future. Where can people reach you if they have any further questions for you?
Yeah, so they can contact me on LinkedIn, or I will put my email address in the chat.
Ah, yeah, you can do that indeed. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'll take these details as well in the wrap up email that we'll be sending at the end of this week or next week, which will also include the recording, the previous recordings. Those things will also include a copy or a link to the survey that we've been talking about. And yeah, this was the last Tech Talk we had. So I want to thank you, Edwin. I want to thank all the attendees and probably the future people who are listening to this recording at a certain point in time. And all that remains to me is to say goodbye and talk to you soon again.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.